Today I wanted to show you how to hand sew a face mask. And we're doing one that's more contoured so that we don't have to deal with pleats. A lot of the face masks you see look like this, but these pleats right here are really, it would be very hard to hand sew. So we're not going to do that kind. We're going to do this type, and I'm using t-shirt ties. Elastic is in short supply, but everyone probably has an old t-shirt that they could cut up. So this is the type that we're going to make. Now, the first thing you need is a pattern, and this is a free pattern at sewingillustration.com, and we're going to do the adult size, so you just have to cut that pattern out. And then what you're going to do, it says to cut 4 fabrics. So you want an outer fabric and a lining fabric, and they should be different so that you can tell which side is which, so that you don't accidentally put the contaminated side next to your face. So I'm just doing plain white fabric for the lining, and then this is my my outer fabric, and you just cut right along the edge here. I've used this a few times, so the edge is gone, but on the solid line. So you're just going to cut that out, and then you'll have a couple things like this. So this one I've actually already sewn, but you have a piece that looks like this and 2 pieces that look like this. And the next thing you're going to want to do, since we are hand sewing these, if you don't have a sewing machine, is we're going to mark a stitching line on these, 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. The way I've done this is on the outer side, you actually only need to mark this part right here. Even though I've marked all of it, I've realized now this is the only seam you really need marked on the outer. On the inner, you should mark them all. So I've done this one, and I'm going to show you how to do this one. There's a few different ways that you can do it. If you just have any ruler, as a matter of fact, if you really wanted to eyeball 1/4 inch, you know, these do not need to be perfect. Do not let perfection be the enemy of just getting something done here. So if you just line up your ruler from a 1/4 inch from the edge, and you can just do, actually that was not a 1/4 inch, there we go. And you can just work your way around. If you have a clear ruler, like I happen to, you can just mark the 1/4 inch seam like this all the way around. So again, anything you have, even if you just want to eyeball it, that will totally work. All right, so we now have our seam allowances marked, and now I'm going to show you how to hand stitch this together, and we're just going to sew this seam first. All right, these are going to be sewn the same way. This is the outside, this is the lining. I've already stitched the outside, but let me show you how I did that. So all you need is a needle and thread. Actually, I've got whatever color thread you have. I'm going to use this gray so that maybe you can see the stitching a little bit better. The first thing you need to do is tie a knot. So I've got two layers of thread here, but I'm only going to use one at a time. So it's just through the needle, and you just wrap that thread around your finger and roll it. And then when you pull that down, it makes a knot. All right. And the next thing actually I want to do is if you have some pins, it can be helpful to pin these 2 pieces of fabric together. If you don't, then you can totally just hold them. But pins do make it a little bit nicer. Okay. All right, so we are going to stitch this right here. If you happen to have a thimble, I like to use a thimble. You don't have to in any way. It's a totally personal choice. But okay, so what we're going to do, and again, I have videos actually that show you how to make that knot and another knot and how to do this running stitch. So if you want a little bit more information than I'm going to give you here, I will link those other videos down below. But so right here is a corner that's 1/4 inch from each of the edges, and we're going to put our needle right down inside there and come right back up. Okay, you're always sewing on the top part of the fabric, because when you get underneath it, you can't see what you're doing, and it's easy to get lost. Okay, so let me get a little closer to the camera here. So you're just going to go down about I don't know, an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch next to that stitch, and you're going to put the needle down, so you can see it on the back, And if you put your finger there, I like to use my middle finger there, you can feel it as soon as the needle goes through. And then you just come right back up. And then you go down. Your right hand stays still if you're right-handed, and your left hand does all the action. So it goes down and up. I'm gonna take this pin out. And you just, however much your needle is sticking up, that's how long your stitch is going to be. And you want them to be, you know, relatively small, you know, about 1/8 of an inch maybe. And down and up and down and up. And you just continue like that. And then when you've got a few on your needle, you just push it through. You pull. Let's see here. And then you just kind of smooth that out. Now, if that seems like, I'm gonna shorten this a little bit. If that seems like a lot of stitches and like you can't do that, then I invite you to just take one stitch. So you just go down and then right back up, right like that, just about 1/8 of an inch, and then pull it through. And you can do one at a time that way. But what you don't want to do, is go down all the way and pull it down, and then have to find your line as you come back up, because that can be really difficult. So what I want you to do, see, it's pretty hard. I can't even find it. Okay, so what you're going to want to do here, again, I'm just going to get to the corner and turn the corner. You go down and up, and the left hand is kind of like just doing this little waving thing with the fabric, and you just get the hang of it. It doesn't matter if your stitches are perfectly even, if they're perfectly straight, it absolutely does not matter. So if you have enough stitches, and however, that totally depends on you, you kind of pull it so it's not crinkled anymore. And then when you continue, you do a little bit of a back stitch. You go back about half a stitch, and then you start again. And the reason you do that is that strengthens your seam, okay? So we're gonna do that, and we're just gonna continue in this way until we get to the end of our seam. And if you're thinking, how long do I cut my thread? About 18 inches. I actually cut this one a little bit long, and you know, when it's shorter, it doesn't get tangled. All right, and I'll just meet you at the end of the seam. Now, I've done this whole seam, and I'm to the edge. I'm again, I'm 1/4 inch from the corner, and you're just going to do a little knot. So you're going to take a small stitch, and then go through the loop, go through the loop again. Make sure you go the same way, or you just undo what you just did. And just because we want things to be really secure, you might want to do a second knot. And that, and we'll just clip this, clip that thread. All right, and then you're going to do the same thing with the outer. So what these are going to look like now, you can see that this is how we're going to get the shape on our masks. And you might want to mark, because these are a little bit, let's see, a little bit different. Yeah, so this is the bottom. So we can just put a little X that we know that this is the bottom of that piece. And see how this matches up here. Yeah, that looks right. And then we're gonna put a little X here so we know that that's the bottom part of those patterns. Okay, so we have those. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add the t-shirt ties. So if you have elastic would also work, or ribbon, or any, you know, number of things like that to make ties. Even people are using shoelaces, and that's fine. But if you can cut up an old t-shirt, this t-shirt was cut an inch thick across the width of the body. And then if you watch this, I'm just gonna pull on both ends here, just like this, and then it magically, it turns into what they call t-shirt yarn. It rolls on itself, and this is gonna be our tie. So I feel like it's a little bit of magic. So here's another one. I'm sorry, I can't get the whole thing in the frame, but I'm just gonna pull it, and it just turns into that. And then you can trim that. Here I've got these, you're gonna need 4 of these, and these are trimmed to about 14 inches. They can be whatever you want, but you want them to be a little bit long so that they are easy to tie behind your head. So let me show you how to attach these. Okay, so I like to take the outer fabric here, And this is the right side, okay? Before, when we've sewed, I guess I never mentioned that, you're gonna sew wrong sides together, okay? Because that keeps our seam allowances inside. So this is the right side, and that's what we're gonna work on now. I'm gonna take one of my t-shirt ties, and I'm just gonna unroll it a little bit at the end. And I'm gonna fold it in half, and that's just to make it a little bit easier to sew, that it's not so many layers. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pin this about, just eyeballing it, about 1/4 inch down from the top of these short sides, okay? And we're gonna do 4 of these, but we're gonna just start with this first one. And again, you're gonna wanna kind of pin that in place. And then we're going to sew it. Okay, so what we know that when we sew, even when we hand sew, we're using 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna stitch this down a little closer to the edge than 1/4 inch. And the thing about when you sew, you can do this the same way, but we're going to go back and forth several times as I don't really need this pin anymore. We're going to go back and forth several times across this, because the last thing you want when you've gone to the trouble of making a mask is for the tie to come out. Ask me how I know that. Actually, the first mask I made with elastic broke. The elastic pulled out the very first time my daughter tried it on. So again, I'm just going to stitch all the way down. This is it's 3 layers of fabric, so it's a little harder to do than before, but totally doable. And you want to get right to the end. Make sure you're going through all the layers of fabric. Doesn't have to look pretty. No one's ever going to see this part of it. Okay, so I'm going to just do one more here. And then again, I'm going to, nope, I just lost my needle there. And then I'm just gonna tie that off, and then I'll show you where to place the next one. Okay, so I've knotted that off, and then we're going to put another one. Again, I'm going to take t-shirt yarn, I'm going to fold it in half. And again, I'm going to place it about 1/4 inch in, okay? 1/4 inch from this edge right here, okay? And I'm going to pin that in place. And I'm going to stitch right here, just you know, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, so that when we come back and sew the 1/4 inch, we won't be stitching right in the same place. So about 1/4 inch from the bottom, because again, our 1/4 inch seam's going to go right there. We're going to stitch that, and I want to reiterate that we are up on the front part of the fabric, and the way we are stitching these in, okay? And then we're going to do the exact same thing on this side. We're going to put one here, and we're going to put one here. So I'm going to go ahead and do those, and then I'll meet you back for the next step. All right, so this is what it looks like now. We have them sewn in place, again, on the front of the fabric, and now we are going to sew the lining to the fabric. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these ties, and you are just going to put them inside here, okay? This is the right side of the fabric. And what we're going to do now is we are going to take our lining fabric, and we're going to sew right sides together. So this is the wrong side of the fabric, and we are going to make sure we marked which part was the bottom, which was here, and this is, I put a little X here so I know that's the bottom too. So we are going to pin these together. And so we're just going to pin this, and we are going to come all the way over here to our seam intersection. I've got a video about how to handle this, but what you need to know now is you just need to match these seams together. And I'm going to put a pin right there. We are going to pin. I like to pin each of my corners first, and then I will go back and pin between the sections. To pin here. And again, here's we've got two seams coming together, and I have a video called How to Sew Through Seam Intersections. I'm going to put our pin right here, and we've got one more corner here to match. Okay, and this sewing is going a longer pin. It's going to go so much faster. Okay, so again, my cat just jumped down off the chair. We are going to put a few more pins in. Okay. Oop, that little guy's trying to get out. Get back in there. So all those ties are sitting on the front part of the mask. Okay, so that's good enough. So what we're gonna do, we know this is the bottom, okay? And what I've done is I have marked two little dots. We can make them a little more obvious here. And what we're going to do is we are not going to sew that closed, because we're going to pull the whole thing out through that gap. So what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing here, and we're just going to follow the stitching line all the way around until we get to here. And so I'll start you off, and I'll show you how to get through these the seam allowances, and you can watch the other video if you need to, and that'll get you going. All right, so we're going to start stitching around. Here's my gap. I like to stitch right to left, so I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to go in and take my first stitch, and my knot pops onto the top of the fabric, and needle goes down, and it just comes right back up again. Right up, and we're gonna go right up to this seam allowance. I'm actually gonna take the pin out. And so this is where these two things come together. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna line them up, and we're gonna push everything over to the left. So there's like a whole pile of fabric over here. And our needle's gonna go down, and as it comes back up, you can feel where that ridge of fabric is. And your needle will just pop up right next to it. And then I'm going to take another stitch to secure that intersection right in the same place. Needle's going to pop up. So that's very secure right now. Then I'm going to slide the needle right from that corner right through the fabric where it comes out on the other side in the corner. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side, where I'm going to push all the seam allowances to the right, and I'm going to put my needle down right next to that big ridge of fabric. I'm going to take a small stitch to secure it, and then I'm just going to keep stitching, and we're just going to go right stitching on that line all the way around until we get to the end. And again, I have another video called Sewing Through Seam Allowances, that if you're a little fuzzy on that part, I'll link that down below. So again, we're just going to stay right under stitching line. My stitches are not perfect, but they're going to be enough to hold these two pieces to hold these two pieces of fabric together to make a mask. All right, so here we go. Make sure you kind of smooth them out so it's not bunched up as you go. And here, I guess I'll show you. We're going to turn the corner here. There's nothing fancy about that, but I'll just show you anyway. See, my needle's going to come up right in the intersection there. And then I'm going to put my needle right back down, right in the corner, and keep stitching. Now I can feel right here it's pretty thick, and that's because that's where my tie is, but it's not. It's a little bit thicker, so you might want to just take maybe 2 stitches or even 1 stitch right here. And this is where it's nice to have a thimble. If you actually have a pair of pliers, you can pull the needle out that way as well. So here we go. We're just gonna keep stitching. All right, and I'll meet you around the other side when I've stitched all the way around the perimeter. One more thing that might be kind of obvious, but I wanted to cover, is this is a long seam we're sewing, and you're probably gonna run out of thread. So before it gets too short, because you need some room to tie the knot, just go ahead. So, you know, I've got like maybe 4 inches left here. I'm just gonna take a small stitch, and again, I'm gonna put my needle through that loop twice, and then trim it, and I'm just going to rethread, and I'm just going to start right where I left off, and I'm almost there. Okay, so I've come to the end here, and I wanted to show you something that I wish I had shown you when we started, and that is that you really want to reinforce the start and end with a few extra stitches, because there's going to be some stress on those points as we pull through, as we turn this right side out. So I'm going to just take about 3 stitches right in place at that point, and then I'm going to tie it off with a double knot. So I'm going to go through twice here, and then I'm just going to do an extra knot. So I'm a little bit of a belt and suspenders girl. Okay, so again, making sure that these 2 points have been reinforced, and I actually went back and sewed a few extra stitches on that one just so that nothing would happen when we do this next part. So you're going to open this up and reach in there, and you are going to go to the far end, and you are just going to pull this out so that it's right side out. And all those ties are going to come out. Like this. Now, if you have something like a chopstick or something, what you can do is you can go in your gap here, and you can just kind of poke out those corners a little bit. And this would be a good time, if you wanted to iron your mask, but you don't really have to. Okay, so it looks like this. So the last thing we need to do is stitch up that little place that we just pulled it out of, and we're just gonna hand stitch that closed. So if you wanted to go iron this, you could, but again, that might be just too much for you. So I'm just going to turn those under like that, and I'm just going to put in a couple pins. You're just going to turn those raw edges inside, and there are a number of ways that you can stitch this closed. One's called a ladder stitches. I'm just going to show you what's called a whip stitch, because I think that it is it's going to be the easiest and fastest, and again, this is going to be on the bottom part of your mask, and you're not even really going to see it. So if you can find some thread, again, it doesn't matter what color thread you use, but I'm gonna get some more like white matching thread here, and I'll show you how to do that whip stitch. All right, my needle is threaded and knotted, and here's the opening. I'm actually moved my pin so that this is the beginning and end of the gap, and that's just one for the middle. So I'm actually gonna take this one out, and I want to get my knot inside the fabric. So I'm just gonna come up inside like that. So that's now, that knot is inside the fabric. And I'm just going to do a whip stitch, which is to just take I'm just gonna sew just a smidge off of the edge there. And you can just continue that way to sew that gap closed. There's 2 folds of fabric there, and you just go just a hair beneath that. It's probably a little bit hard to see because it is white thread on light fabric, but we're just gonna continue just every, I don't know, I'm going to say every 1/16 of an inch. And it'll just take a few minutes to get to the edge there. Okay, so we'll see you at the other side. All right, once I got to the end, I just tie it off a knot in the same way that you always do. And there we go. There's our completed mask. So again, I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, they're really recommending 100% cotton, which we quilters have in big supply. But if you can get your hands on some cotton, you can download this, this pattern for free. And hopefully this will help you out if you need to hand sew a face mask.